All right. In that case, we'll now move on to group 4.
Sir, I am Poddar from group number 5.
Yes.
Is it possible to take group 5? I have actually examination duty at 1 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Fine. Fine.
Please,
I'm so sorry.
please.
Yes. Yes.
Is
Yes.
it okay, sir?
Yes. Yes. Please do. Please.
Sir, just request. Okay. So
Yes.
should I start group number 5?
Yes. All right. Yeah. But it's already 12. Then you have to leave, I think, right? Your
No,
exam.
at 1 o'clock I have
1 o'clock.
duty. Online, that is online
Fine.
again. Online.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Yeah, you can go ahead. Is that okay for group 4? Does anybody in the group
Yes.
4 have a problem?
Group 4, this is a request.
No, sir, absolutely no problem. You can
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Sir, we are working on signals and systems from last 3 days continuously.
Yes.
So it really reminds me the thing, one statement that is a Vaso Chistam Jagat Sarvam.
Mm.
It really means that Maharshi Vyas, in the memory of whom we are celebrating the Guru Purnima, his literature has touched each and every aspect of our life.
Yes.
Really, I'm just observing that signals and systems also has touched each and every aspect of our subjects. We can take the example of control system, we can take communication system. Even while yesterday we were talking, that is a thermal systems also,
Yes.
translational, rotational systems. So everywhere signal systems is there. So
Yes.
it really correlates that signals and systems has touched each and every aspect, and that is Vaso System Jagat Sarvam.
Yes. Yes. No, very good. So it's a ubiquitous. It's a ubiquitous subject. Yes.
Yes, ubiquitous subject. Our discussion topic is lecture number 14. That is
I'll
conditions.
turn my video off now so you get better bandwidth. Yeah. Oh.
Yes, conditions for stability. The presentation which we are giving is what is stability, why stability, and the examples which we are giving so that we can define the stability. To define the stability, it is defined as for the bounded input, output must be bounded. And in addition, in the absence of input, output tends to 0. If it is not, but it should be tending to 0. But whenever we are discussing, because we are using this given in the book, that is for bounded input, output must be bounded. But what is exactly mean by bounded? So bounded input means the magnitude of input signal must be less than infinity, and bounded output means magnitude of output must be less than infinity. In mathematical statement, we can say that m of x, that is magnitude of input signal x, must be less than infinity, and in such a cases, magnitude of output signal my must be less than infinity. But again, sir, question comes in my mind, infinity is what we can say, because infinity is the number which we can say, but which number we can take, that is uncountable. We can say in some books we can say that infinity is uncountable number. But suppose my daughter, she is 3 years old and she knows the number, one digit number 0 to 9. Then number 10, which is known to me, but that number 10, even if it is a small, but that is beyond her imagination. So even if number 10 can be a infinity to her also.
Yes.
So in that case, which is infinite is not a specific number we can say, but which is beyond that particular system, that we can say as an infinite. So this is about what exactly bounded bounded input and bounded output is. This is just bounded range I have mentioned for the input signal, that is between minus a to plus a. If the signal is in this range, then we can say that the signal is bounded. This is just a few examples I want to quote over here. In class, I like to give these examples. I will take a bucket of a 5 liters capacity, and every time I will try to I'll put a drop of water in a bucket. Bucket will not overflow. So input is also bounded, means input is a drop of water, and output will also not, bucket will not overflow. So that system becomes stable. But step by step, the bucket will capacity will full. That is, bucket have now 5 liters of capacity, and after that, even if I will add a drop of water, bucket overflow takes place. So now the system becomes unstable. So initially the system is stable, but now the system becomes unstable. Another case is I have a bucket with a capacity of 5 liters and I will try to pour the 10 liter of water in that bucket. So definitely that bucket will overflow. So system will become unbounded. So 5 liter, 5 liter is one example, but 10 liter is infinity for that particular bucket. So that system will become unstable. Even if we'll take the example of operational amplifier, inverting amplifier, suppose gain is 10. If I'm going to apply 0.5 as, if I will apply 0.5 as the 0.5 volt as the input signal, I will get minus 5 volt as the output signal because gain is 10. Suppose I will apply the input voltage as 2 volt, mathematically the output will be 20 volts. But as to the operational amplifier, I applied plus minus 12 volt signal. So approximately 90% of 12 volt, that is a minus 10.8 will be maximum output signal. So even if mathematically 20 volt minus 20 volt I have to get, still I am getting minus 10.8 volt as a maximum because now it becomes a saturation level for the operational amplifiers. So initially there should be some linear relationship is followed, but after that output saturates. So in this way, example can be quoted. Sometimes I used to give example. I want confirmation also from you all that a car is in a standstill position, and car is running on a Pune-Mumbai express highway with a speed of 80 kilometers per hour. As the students, which system is stable and which system is unstable? Because I want to correlate some system is stable, that is static and dynamic. A car which is standing, that is a zero speed, mostly students immediately replied that car which is standing is a stable and car which is moving is unstable. So then I explained that them that okay, the input is also bounded, that is 80 kilometers per hour is the speed, and output is also, that is car is running smoothly on express, so that is also stable. So both the systems are stable. Then I asked them that suppose I am going to teach you a subject signals and systems, and I am standing on a dais and I am supposed to deliver signals and systems. To make the subject more interesting, sometimes I can sing one song or some part of a movie to create interest or analogy. But suppose for continuously 1 hour, just I am talking about one movie, or I am start singing a song on a dais when I am supposed to engage the lecture, the student may comment that sir's mind is unstable today because he's not giving, his mind is out of control, means he is unstable, like that. So in this way, I try to correlate the analogy to give the examples related to stability and instability. These are some of the examples we have quoted for the system. Suppose input is x of t is equal to 2 and y of t is equal to d by dt of x of t. That is y of t is equal to d by, because the x of t is 2 means a DC signal I applied. So the derivative of that will become 0. So output is not moving towards infinity, and that's why the system is stable. Another example is h of t is equal to e raised to minus 5 into mod of t. This is example I explained. So according to condition of stability, in minus infinity to plus infinity, mod of h of t dt must be less than infinity. So substituting the value of t over here, we are getting the result as 2 by 5, and that is less than infinity. So the system is also stable. And one more example, that is y of n is equal to 2 into x of n. So for every bounded input x of n, output y of n is also bounded, and hence the system is stable. So with this basic definitions of stable, stability of a conditions for stability of a system, by taking some real life examples and this mathematical examples, I tried to give the difference between stable and unstable system. For the time domain feature analysis, a continuous time system, bounded input, bounded output, stable, if and only if its impulse response is absolutely integrable. And for Laplace domain features, a continuous time system is bounded input, stable, if and only if the region of convergence of transfer function includes imaginary axis, that is ROC also I mentioned. So this is all about the discussion on conditions for stability of a system. Thank you.
Okay. So very nice, Professor Potdar. Now, a few points of observation here.
Yes, sir.
I very much liked your practice of giving different informal examples. That's a very good way to keep a class active and alert. It's very nice. So it's always nice to give these examples and try and bring in. And you must be careful though, what you illustrated through some of your examples, like the empty bucket and full bucket, or for that matter, like the operational amplifier, is that very often in real life, a property holds in a certain range of operation.
Okay.
So, for example, an amplifier can be said to be linear in a certain range of operation, as you said. And if your input goes outside that range of operation, then it begins to exhibit non-linearities. So it's in practical life, it is, as you said very correctly, it is more appropriate to talk about ranges of operation in which you can make the assumptions of linearity, shift invariance, and so on. So I think this is the message which we should take away from your presentation, which is very important. It's a very important message. Yes. Now, one comment I have, I fully agree with you. In fact, I would like to add to your observation that, if you once in a while have moments of amusement in a lecture,
Okay.
it's always good, So as you said, if you, once in a while have sing a little song in the class, I think it's good, It sort of makes the class, it sort of amuses the class, and it also gives them a reason to be more attentive. I agree with you. The class should not be dry, dry and heavy all the time. I agree. And in fact, I add to that by explaining, very often, I love to listen to the talks of Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar ji. Many of you might have heard some of his talks. And one of the things he says, which I like a lot, is humor must be like salt in food. So if you have a little bit, if you don't have salt at all in food, it's not tasty. But if you put too much of salt in the food, again, it's not tasty. So
Yes.
Salt in the food is what humor must be like in a class, or what amusement must be like in a class, in a lecture. That's my input on that. Now, one observation towards the end of your lecture, you talked about, of course, stability from the point of view of bounded input, bounded output. But you also brought in the notion of Laplace domain. See, at this point, we have not talked about the Laplace transform.
Okay.
It is better not to bring in topics from the transform. As I said before, it's better not to confuse transform domain topics with these basic properties, which don't necessarily have to do with the transform domain at all. Yes?
Okay.
So these are my observations, and now let me invite observations from the rest of the participants.
Hello, sir. This is
Yes.
Manisha.
Now, Professor Poddar, could you stop sharing so that everybody can? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
it's my personal opinion. I don't know how far it is correct.
Yes.
But too many analogies given for one topic loses the significance of the topic itself.
Okay.
So that is what I felt. And the stress of the property in terms of impulse response, I felt was less in the presentation.
Okay. That's an important observation. Here in this presentation, so Professor Poddar, this is an important observation. I think we should take that important observation that, the importance of the impulse response in this context was probably not brought out more clearly. Is that right, Professor Manisha?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And also, one can be a little wary about how much of analogy to use, right? That is also true. As I said, like salt in the food, is that right, Professor Manisha?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Very nice. Yes. Any other observations or some suggestions or comments? Yes, Professor Seema, yes.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good morning, sir. So, since I am from the background of electrical engineering, we talk about stability day in, day out. So, for me, connecting stability to signals and systems, I think at least 2 to 3 lines should be given on how stability is from the perspective of signal and how stability from the perspective of the system description or system design. That should be emphasized if stability is being taught in a class of signals and systems.
Okay.
Because it can also be related to signal, because when we say it's not bounded, then we talk about signals, input and output. That's the observation we make. But then why it comes into picture is because of the system itself or system design itself or a change in the system itself. So I think that should also be brought out. And even while giving the analogy, signals and systems, both the things should be emphasized. It's my point of view. I think you can throw some light on it.
Okay, so Professor Seema, I must sound a word of caution here. Stability is a property of a system, not a signal. However, to test stability, there are certain particular kinds of signals that need to be applied. This is how we must stress it. So when you are trying to test for stability, then it's a class of signals which need to be used as test inputs. But
impulse is one of them.
Impulse is actually, yes, impulse could be one of them for a linear shift invariant system.
Okay.
But not for other kinds of systems.
Okay.
You know, what is required is bounded input. So in fact, in a way that contradicts the impulse, because, you know, for a linear shift invariant system in continuous time, the impulse is not really bounded, you know, in that sense.
Okay.
So in that sense, you know, there is a bit, so that's why in discrete time, it's easier to explain this, you know. However, stability must be emphasized as a property of a system, not a signal. That's a common mistake which students make. Yes.
Yeah. Even I wanted, so signals we can observe the signals to understand the stability of the system.
That is right. We can observe the response to certain classes of signals to test for stability.
Stability of the system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we can classify which are the test signals, what can be the possible responses, and what can be the possible design aspect from in frequency or time domain. That is the next level.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Okay. So thank you.
Can I give one example related to this?
Yes, please do. Please do.
Actually, this is related to the system and the signal. If you know the response of that particular signal to the system, and if it is making unstable, actually this is a caution, and accordingly we can actually in future, whenever we give this signal, we'll be very careful about it. Take an example of suppose a human being. Again, it is a best example for every examples, right? So it is like if I have the allergy of something, right? If I have the allergy of something, suppose a dust particle. Once I know that dust particles are there, and whenever actually I be in contact with this dust particle, I have some allergic things which will be there on my body. So in future, whenever actually I will be there, so I will see to it like I will not be there in that particular type of environment, or I will avoid that environment so that my system will be stable. System will be stable, because having something rashes on your body, it's related to the human being's instability, because he will be there all the time in the loop of making that rashes in a better way. That is what the looping is there, and he becomes unstable. So I think the signal point of view, it is the caution that which signals are there, we can identify that signal so that the system performance will be stable. So I think that is the
so let me summarize the message which Professor Somani has given. You know, very often discussing stability of systems, particularly for systems which are in that sense marginally, it's only, that's an informal term, by the way, marginally. You know, in fact, since he brought up the idea of people, you know, I keep telling my class when I teach the subject that stable systems can be likened to reasonable people, and unstable systems can be likened to unreasonable people.
True.
Who are reasonable? Yes. Who are reasonable people? People with whom if you behave reasonably, they behave reasonably with you, right? But of course, if you behave unreasonably, even with a reasonable person, the reasonable person might behave unreasonably with you. So as long as you behave reasonably, you can be assured that a reasonable person behaves reasonably with you. On the other hand, for an unreasonable person, how do you say a person is unreasonable? there is at least one instance where you behaved reasonably with the person, but the person was unreasonable in his or her behavior with you. That is like an unstable system or an unreasonable person. So with an unreasonable person, anything can happen if you behave reasonably. When you behave reasonably with him, there is at least one instance where a reasonable behavior with an unreasonable person results in unreasonable unreasonable response. That is why you call the person unreasonable. But it's not necessary that every time you behave reasonably with him, he would behave or she would behave unreasonably with you. Similarly, it's quite possible that if you behave unreasonably with an unreasonable person, sometimes he or she might behave reasonably, sometimes he or she might behave unreasonably. So when you behave unreasonably with either a reasonable person or an unreasonable person, nothing can be said about the outcome. But when you behave reasonably with a reasonable person, you're sure that the response will be reasonable. Yes?
Yeah.
That's the way to look at it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes? All right. Any other comments or observations? All right. If there are none, we'll now move to group 4, which we had interluded in between. Yes, group 4.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Today we'll be giving the presentation based on the lecture 13 that we learned from Professor Gadre, and then the pedagogic aspect of it, how we would have presented in the class. So the lecture 13 was about associative and commutative property of LSI system. And the example that was taken to prove these properties was convolution. But before I start presenting it, let me tell you a few challenges that I faced to make this understand it and then make it a presentation to present before you. Was I saw a lot of materials on the internet, which is a usual practice that we teachers take up and try to present in the class. And there was a confusion that I came across was the properties of LTI system, properties of LSI system, and properties of convolution. This was all, they all were similar for me because I'm first time I'm learning it, or I'll be teaching it if I teach. So this is one confusion that I went through, and then when I correlated with to Professor Gadre's lectures that were shown, I could see that he has taken convolution as an example of as an example on a LSI system. And then I club them all together and I'm presenting the material before you. So since the properties of associativity and the properties of commutativity is on a system where convolution is taking place, so I thought that it is always wise that I let my students understand convolution first and then go to these properties. So only 2 slides, not much of time. Just a small brush up of how we decompose XT into impulse responses, and then the property of each of these impulse responses can help us characterize the response of the signal itself. Is the first few lines of this presentation that I'm showing here about convolution. So if HT is the impulse response of a unit impulse delta t, which will be used to reconstruct a signal or approximate a signal, then the 2 properties, time invariance and linearity, can help us understand how this signal can be convolved. So the signal delta t, if the system is time invariant, then the impulse response of delta t will be delta t minus tau. Tau will be ht minus tau if it's time invariant. Now from the property of linearity, which incorporates homogeneity and additivity, Additivity means we add them together. We can add them together, and the response is also added. And scaling in homogeneity, both of them together. When we take them together, we can convolve a signal. And the mathematical expression for a signal xt, which has the components as impulse response, integrated on a scaled impulse response, that is integration from -infinity to infinity x tau into delta t minus tau, can have a response integration of -infinity to infinity x tau h t minus tau delta tau. This entire mathematical expression is actually convolution of the signal xt. Now, as far as my understanding goes, a convolution of a signal itself is a result function and also process of computing it. So what it actually does to the signal? So it's very easy to understand from the digital version of it, digital time version of it. What it does to the signal is this, it actually modifies the shape of the signal. Convolution means modifying the shape of the signal by another signal. And what is this process? It is the process of integral of the product of two functions. When one is reversed and shifted, then we get a convolution. So we can see it goes through a process of it. It means each impulse response can go through a process of, when the signal is convolved, flip, slide, multiply, and integrate. So this is the process the signal will go through when the signal will be convolved. This can be represented in a diagrammatic representation as shown in the particular diagram or a particular slide. If f and g are two signals, let's say, and they are convolved, then g is flipped at discrete times. We can see at different times that represented in white, and then yellow, green, and blue. You can see at different times, and then we understanding it will help us to understand how can we convolve a signal in continuous domain. So the signal g is flipped, and then it is kind of scaled with signal f, and then again at some other time it is shifted. And then again, it is the flipped signal is again scaled with signal f, and like this at different times we have gone through the process of, you can see, flip, shift, multiply, and integrate. Then when we integrate the entire thing together, we arrive at a convolved signal. Now, this convolution process itself will have the properties same as in a LSI or a LTI system. So, I mean, this is something which is difficult for me to make everybody understand because it's first time. So I move it on, pass it on to Mridula ma'am, who will be presenting. So this is what I understood and I would have presented.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, Professor Mridula, are you going to continue?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. First of all, please pardon me for the various sounds which are coming in the background because of the constant work going in my home, and I can't stop the workers because they are at their peak now. So please bear with the noise, background noise. So I will just add certain points which I hope I am audible, sir.
Yes, go on. Yeah.
So I will just add a few points with this presentation by Singama. And suppose if I want to talk about the impulse response, so if yt is the output of any continuous time LTI system with input xt and with no initial energy. So this is a general diagram, we can say. But if now we can modify this diagram in such a way that if a unit impulse has been given to this LTI system, then in that case the output is explicitly defined as the impulse response and it is represented by h of t. So this is basically a basic model for any linear time invariant system. But when we have to exaggerate or we want to apply this model to actual all the system, so if this is any system kind of, if you can take this as an any system and not exclusively any impulse response system. So if in generalized input is xt and if generalized output we want to know about output yt, so then what is the way to know how can we know the output of this system? So that's why the system or the tool available in the signal processing is this, that is called as a convolution. So convolution is nothing but an approach to describe the input-output relationship for any LTI system. So for that matter, we can say that if my xt, that is input, is a unit impulse function, then probably we can multiply this input function with the impulse response function so as to get our convolved signal. So I want to emphasize that convolution is an approach or tool to describe basically the input-output relationship between any black box system. Now, mathematically, if we want to define this convolution, this is how the mathematical equation for the convolution goes like this. So it is nothing but, as ma'am has said, that it is the shifted version. Then we have to multiply and then integrate. So the key point over here is the system output at t is in response to all the past and present values of the input signal, not just at time t. So wherever the signal is existing, so for that matter we have to convolve or we have to do this process of multiplying the shifted version of impulse response with the present input. So that's why conceptually we can think that convolution as a kind of a weighted averaging sum. So in this way, the signal x of t can be averaged with respect to the convolution. So this is how the whole idea of the convolution. Now, as far as the lecture is concerned, this is regarding the commutative and associative properties. So basically, commutative properties and associative properties are applicable to the convolutional as well as the LTI system, or they are generalized any mathematical properties we can say. So as I mentioned in this slide, that commutative property mathematically it means changing the order in which you add or subtract number should not change or does not change the sum or product. So whether it is applicable to convolution, whether it is applicable to any system or simple mathematics, this property should hold. The next property is associative property, which means that changing the grouping of numbers when adding or multiplying should not change the sum or product. So these two properties, when we apply for our convolutional things, this is how we should interpret it. So if I talk about the commutative property, now if I'm taking x of t as an input and y of t as an output as our normal convention, so h1t and h2t are the impulse response of these two systems through which our input is going. Okay, so even if I change this systems, that means the order of the system, I should get the same output. So this is how the commutative property of the convolution, and it should be hold true for all the x of t and for all the h1t and h2t for that matter. Even if I add h3 of t, it should not affect the output. Coming to the another property, which is a distributive property. So the distributive property says that if I have to distribute, I mean, there is a common input to the impulse response h1 and h2 and which are providing the corresponding y1 and y2 as an output, then whether I can do it separately or together. So whether I can do it separately or together, the outputs, that is y of t, should not change. That means they should give me the same output. So that is once again related with the convolutional, this distributive property is. The third property is an associative property. So associative property is something like whether I can distribute the impulse response or may add them, may change the order of the impulse response, provided all these things. So mathematically this property can be seen like that. The output should not change even if I do the interchanging, even if I add the two outputs in between. So mathematically I should get the same output. That is how the associative property is. Now, as far as this lecture of Dr. Kadre sir, we have discussed the associative properties and distributive properties. But coming to the next thing, which is related to that lecture, that is causality of the system, we should understand what is a memoryless system and what is a system with memory. So, a system is said to be memoryless if for any time, that is for t equal to t1, the value of the output at time t1 depends only on the value of the input at time t equal to t1. Or in other words, the value of the output signal depends only on the present value of the input signal. So that's why the memory is coming into picture. So if I am talking about a memoryless system, so a memoryless system is something like a resistor where the voltage at time t0 depends only on the value of the current at that time and not on the previous time. So that can be considered as a memoryless system. Whereas if I take the example of a capacitor, which it can be a system with a memory, a short system with a memory, wherein the voltage depends on past values of the current. So so we can say the capacitor has a memory of the system. Why we want that? Because it's related with the causality of the system, because the causal system is a system which depends only on the present and the past values of the input to the system. And this has been already discussed in I think Prema ma'am's group number 2. I think group number 2 has already discussed with the examples. So this is how what I interpreted from the lecture, and this is what I am just wanted to share myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So very interesting. I must point out some good features of this presentation. One is that in Seema Behera's presentation, she very correctly brought out that convolution and systems need to be distinguished. Convolution is an operation which is useful in the context of linear shift invariant systems. And you can talk about the properties of the operation of convolution in its own right. And you can, of course, talk about system properties. And you can bring the correlation between them. And in fact, Professor Mrudula Korde also showed what interpretation the properties of convolution give to systems. So convolution is commutative and associative. This has different kinds of implications for systems. One is that LTI systems can be interchanged. But it also means that the input and the impulse response can be interchanged. So you see, the same property of convolution has multiple implications. This is the point which one needs to bring out. Now, it was also interesting to see that in the presentation, they brought out the importance of or a physical interpretation of convolution as a kind of weighted average, or as a way in which one signal can affect the shape of another. That's an interesting interpretation. All right, very nice. Now, so there's a question from Seema Diwan asking, what is the application of convolution properties in real world examples? Is it for simplification of analysis? Well, more than simplification, I would say it is for universality of analysis. So when I have a linear shift invariant system, say for example, an RLC network, what inference can you draw from the properties of LTI systems about RLC networks? You can say, if I know the impulse response of an RLC network, or in many cases, if I know the step response of an RLC network, I can predict the output of the RLC network to any input. So I would say the application of convolution is more from the point of view of universality of analysis, not necessarily simplification every time. Sometimes it would simplify, but sometimes it would universalize. So it would tell you that if I do one experiment on an LSI system, it tells you everything about the system. Yes? Any other questions or comments before we go on to the next one? We'll take one more presentation before we break for lunch.
I think for memoryless and memory, we can give the example like in digital circuit, the combinational circuit may be memoryless, and the sequential circuit is your the memory circuit. That is
very good. Yes.
Which is again the reflect the causal
system. Yes. So in a digital circuits, in the context of digital circuits, combinational circuits are examples of memoryless systems, and sequential circuits are very good examples of systems with memory. That's a very good example. Yes. Yeah, Professor Seema Behra has a question.
As I told you, the challenges I faced. So, can we say linear shift invariant system? Linear time invariant system is a subset of linear shift invariant system?
See, shift is a more general term used for any independent variable.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
That is a more general
term. Okay. Okay, sir. Thank
you. Yes. Any other questions or comments?
Sir, excuse me. Sir, actually, can you quote a certain real-time application which can be given to the students based on these distributive and associative properties? Because mathematically we are able to show the blockwise, but any real-time example?
Yeah. So one very simple example, one very simple real-time implication is the following. See, if you put you have two RLC systems, right? Resistive network, resistive, capacitive, inductive. Now, you have an input-output relationship in RLC network, right? And you have two-port networks, right? Now, if you interchange the order of the two RLC networks, the overall input-output relationship will not change. That's an interesting thing. Think about it. If you have two RL, yes.
Sir, I can add for this the similar way. It is whatever the cable distribution network is there nowadays, right?
Yes.
So that is also the best example of that. If I am having that particular coupler, distributor is there, right?
Yes.
If I am changing the distributors, like it is a 2:4 or 3:4 is there, and before that, if I am having 2:2, and if I interchange sometimes, actually I'll not get any effect as such because output remains same.
That's right, because both of them in principle are linear shift invariant.
Correct.
Very good. That's a good example. Yeah, it's a simple example, simple and effective example. Yes.
That is actually, I just understand because day before yesterday only the problem is there in my network.
Oh, I see.
And the person came, so I actually go with him of the cable network, and what he is actually doing that I have seen. So he has just changed the order of this, and accordingly that whatever the system, and that there is one failure of this, but he has interchanged, and I'm not having any effect in the output system of all those who are actually the customers of that particular service.
Right.
So that is an best example that when we can have this
very nice
system, right? Good. Sir, I can give now presentation.
Yes, let's have one more presentation. Yeah, let's have one more presentation, and then we'll break for lunch. Yeah.
Just good afternoon, sir.
Yes, very good afternoon.
So my topic for presentation is convolving discrete signals. That is a now things has been taught, a lot of things has been discussed related to convolution, related to the impulse response, and how it has been applied. So it's somewhat easy because actually a lot of things has been just a deliberation done. So my group number 6 is there, and our members are Amrish Kumar Sahu and Amrita Agashi Jayanti KB, and myself Sunil Somani, and Krishna Saladi is there. So I think 2 have not reported yet. We 3 are continuing with this particular presentation. So convolving discrete signal, that is the topic. Now again the convolution, so whatever the earlier group is there, that has been explained very well as far as the mathematical things are considered. Just to highlight that what has one of the very important concept in electrical engineering, and now it is applicable to all engineering. So it is not limited to electrical engineering now. And it has been used to determine the output of a system produces for a given signal, a given input signal. That is what the convolution is. as the convolution can be expressed with respect to the mathematical expression, right, in theoretical definition, it is an integral that expresses the amount of overlap one function when it is shifted over the another function. So whatever the earlier speaker or earlier presenter says, it is meaning of the same one, right? It is the integral that expresses the amount of overlap of one function when it is shifted over the another function. So that whatever the time reversal, then it is in time shifting, so it is a flipping, then it is a sliding, that particular things comes into picture, and that gives you the output of this. So it can be shown that a linear time invariant system is completely characterized by its impulse response. Again, it is a very true that is an impulse response. Yesterday's presentation in that impulse responses that actually that madam has said, like the shifting property of the discrete time impulse function tells us that the input signal to a system can be represented as a sum of scaled and shifted unit impulses. Right, so that shifting property, that whatever she has shown, and that shifting property of the discrete time impulse function tells us that the input, and this particular LTI system can be characterized by the impulse response, and what actually this impulse response is. So by linearity, it would seem reasonable to compute of the output signal as the sum of a scaled and shifted unit impulse responses. That is what both the properties of additivity and homogeneity comes into picture, and we can have the output reasonable. We can compute the output signal if we know the unit impulse response. This is exactly what the operation of convolution accomplishes, right? Hence, convolution can be used to determine a linear time invariant system's output from the knowledge of the input and the impulse response. Again, finally, whatever that Professor Athawale says in his presentation, again, to the student, what is to be shown? Whether the system's output is responsible, or whether that h of t is responsible, or whether it is an excitation, that is x of t is responsible, right? So the answer lies between that. If you know the knowledge of the system, right, knowledge of that particular system means like impulse response, and whatever the input you are giving, you can very well predict the output, very well predict the output. So that is a predictive analysis. In the predictive analysis, actually, we can use these particular things if you know the system performance, and based upon the input, we can very well predict the output. So this is a theoretical background. Mathematically, it has been shown, but how it is important, that has just I have highlighted this. This is what actually it is very simple, as Gadre sir says that always, that you should start with the discrete because it is an easier to understand to the students, right? So whatever the earlier presentation very well related to the continuous time convolution. The output is given by, again, convolution of the impulse response with the input signal. So this is a convolution of the impulse response with the input sequence, right? Signal sequence. Now, in case of a discrete, this is that actually the prima facie, when we write this y of n is equal to x of n convolved with the h of n. So it is a convolution of both impulse as well as the input signal. Now it is again defined in very well other way around. So what is exactly when we do this means what we are doing. In case of a continuous time signal, we are integrating over, right? Integrating over 0 to infinity, and sorry, minus infinity to infinity, x of tau into h of t minus tau. So in the case of a discrete, it is that is an integration. It's an analogy is a summation in case of a discrete way. So it is a discrete. K is equal to minus infinity to infinity, right? X of k into h of n minus k, where x of k is what actually this k operator we are using, not to confuse with this particular n, and right. So that's why we are using this x of k and h of n minus k. So this is by definition, right? This is by definition that how you can actually get output if you know the input sequence and if you know the impulse sequence, right? Now what we are doing actually when we are converting this, when we are finding this, what we are doing is x of n has been actually converted or represented back as an x of k, and h of n is be represented first by h of k, then by flipping or then by time reversal, we are making it as h of minus k, right? And then slide is called time shifting. We make it as h of n minus k, and then multiplying together, summing over the k is equal to minus infinity to infinity. So way that actually we can find out the function, right? Find out the function given that xn is given, hn is given, right? So I will give this simple example do in this. So it is a discrete linear convolution. If you have been given two sequences like x of n is equal to abc and h of n is equal to suppose efg. So I am directly writing the tabular method, which is an easier to understand to the student also, because they have done a lot of mathematics as far as the matrices is considered, as far as this determinants are considered. They have done a lot. So it is very well connect with this mathematics which they have done and with the system that is there. So that is graphically also we can have that, but in a tab is there, that is whatever you can have on the right, just in multiply this, whatever these components are there, that is nothing but the product of this. So EA, EB, EC, likewise FA, FB, FC, and this one GA, GB, GC. Right, these are the components of this particular tabular form. Now, what will the convolved output is? Convolved output is this when you take in a crossway, right? So it is an EA, then it is an EB plus FA, then it is an EC plus FB plus GA, then it is FC plus GB, and finally GC. So this is what the convolved output, or this is nothing but the YN, right? This is nothing but YN, which is the output which has been derived from knowing the impulse sequence as well as the input sequence for that particular system, right? And you can see that there are 5 components are there in the output, and 3 components are there. Sorry, 3 number is there in a sequence, input sequence, and for the h of n, which is nothing but the impulse sequence, is 3 are there. So whatever the output is coming, output which is having a 5 sequence. So it is very important to know that if the 2 sequences have m and n numbers of samples respectively, then the resulting convoluted sequence will be m plus n minus 1 samples. So this has been shown with this particular example, and to understand this, it is a very easy as a tabular method. So this is just given by the notations, right? But if you take the sequence like this, xn is equal to 1, 2, 3, and h of n is equal to minus 1, 2, 2, right? And when you just actually mimic or duplicate whatever we have done in the last one, so 1, 2, 3, and minus 1, 2 and 2. Just cross multiply this. These are the things, and you take on crossway. So it is minus 1, minus 2 plus 2. Then it is 2 plus 4 minus 3. Then it is 4 plus 6 and 6. So it is in sequences. The output convoluted sequence is minus 1, 0, 3, 10, and 6. Right, 10 and 6. So now again it is in 5 things are there. So whatever m plus n minus 3 plus 3 minus 1, so 5 samples are there in convolution output, right? Convoluted output. So that way we can show, or we can actually give an example as far as this. Now x of n, which is nothing but the sequence which has been there as an input sequence. So it is in sampled sequence, and h of n is again the impulse sequence is there. So what is the output? So based upon that, we can predict any system, right? We can predict any system. So performance, if we know the impulse response of the system, and based upon the impulse response of the system, whatever the input we are giving. Now, best example for this is something like, suppose a low pass filter is a system, right? Low pass filter is the system. Now, if we know the characteristics of the low pass filter, like take an example that that whatever the cutoff frequency is in 4 kilohertz. If the cutoff frequency is a 4 kilohertz, now whenever I know that the low pass filter, that is whatever the system has, is nothing but cutoff frequency fc is equal to 4 kilohertz. Now based upon the input, what is the output finally? Output finally we'll get a very simple curve where the cutoff frequency is in 4K. Up to that you will get a pass band, and after that you will get the attenuation band, right? Attenuation band. So this analogy, if I know that impulse response, or if I know the functionality of that particular black box, right, and based upon the input, actually we can very well predict that how the response will be, what will be the attenuation factor. This is what I say, filter, but that can be an attenuator, that can be an amplifier. There are a lot of systems are there, or a lot of circuits are there which we are really using in our day-to-day life, right? Day-to-day life. That can be an example for this, because it is now thing which is not understood here, right? I have uttered only the things which is the practical cases are there. Now filter, when I say filter, is the given when we are going into a certain different context. Otherwise, the filter is simply the circuit of an RLC. If it is a passive type of nature is there, it is the combination of these parasites, and that is a network. But in other context, in other subject context, we name it as a filter. Anyway, the combinations of and we can give, this is what actually the discrete linear convolution. So I think that's all from my side.
Okay, very good. So very nice presentation, and in fact, let me emphasize some very important virtues of this presentation. Professor Somani very beautifully brought out the matrix diagonal method of convolution. So in fact, not only did he listen to my lecture, but he also brought out an additional illustration which would make it easier to understand convolution. So this is something which always adds value. When you it always brings out, it's always useful to have your own thoughts being added to what you've listened to, and when the students see that you are putting in your own thinking into what you've learned, then they're also interested in putting their thinking into what you're teaching them. So this was a very good thing. I liked this idea of bringing, and this tabular form in which you have cross diagonals is a very good way of illustrating certain properties of convolution also. It, for example, makes it much easier to understand the complexity of convolution, the computational complexity of convolution. How much of addition, how much of multiplication do you need to do convolution of two finite length sequences? Very good. Now, in fact, I also liked the idea of selecting. Of course, this is applicable for discrete convolution, finite length. For infinite length or for continuous time convolution, you would need to then illustrate it by other methods, right? Let me now invite reviews from other participants here. Do you have any other comments or observations? Okay, I don't see any further comments and observations. Now, anyway, we have already put down very clearly the sequence in which groups are going to make presentations, and all the 3 cycles have been assigned. So we will now break for lunch and we'll reassemble at 4 p.m. And at 4 p.m. we'll have the remaining groups make the second cycle of presentations, groups 7, 8, and 9, 10. And then we will go on to the third cycle of presentations. So of course, now all of you are getting used to the idea of presentation and critical review. I'm very happy. So are there any comments before we conclude this session? All
no,
right.
Sir.
Yes, all right. So we'll conclude the session and we'll reassemble at 4 p.m. Thank you so much, and a very good afternoon to all of you.